Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Uncommon Alliances, How Partnerships Fuel Progress. I'm so glad that you all could join us today. My name is Sabrina Baptiste. I am the project director for Pathways Alliance, and I'll be representing Pathways Alliance. I'll be talking today about why coalitions matter now more than ever, and how the Pathways Alliance is working alongside partners and my colleague here, Aurora Dredger, like the Educating All the Learners Alliance to tackle big challenges in education today. You will hear from Aurora, who's also the project director of Educating All Learners Alliance, and you will also hear from her colleague, Brett Rohrer today. So we'll have some special conversations around what does it mean to be a part of a coalition. First, I would like to tell all the folks a little bit about the Pathways Alliance. The Pathways Alliance is an uncommon coalition of leading organizations from the K through 12 and higher education ecosystems. We're dedicated to supporting and implementing inclusive educator preparation pipelines, including teacher residency and apprenticeship programs. Our coalition has about over 80 partners. And we are super excited about the work that we do. I will pass it on to my colleague, Aurora, so she can tell us about herself and a little bit about ELA.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Sabrina. My name is Aurora Dreger, born, bred, and based in Brooklyn, New York, and I'm so excited to be representing EALA, the Educating All Learners Alliance, as the project director. EALA is an uncommon coalition of over 170 nonprofit organizations, schools, all working together to support students who learn differently, students with disabilities, anybody who is working with or supporting a kiddo or a person who learns a little bit differently. We've got all sorts of great resources and coalition building to build capacity for the field and keep moving the mission forward. Great. With that, let's talk about the agenda a little bit today.
So here's what we're covered today. We'll start with why partnerships matter right now. Then, of course, you will hear a little bit about Pathways and ELA in our collaboration. We'll take a look at some examples of uncommon alliances and actions. We'll share some strategies and tools for scaling impact. And we will close out with some action steps and figure out how you all can get involved. Next slide, please, Laura. A little bit about framing the challenge and why we're here. Pathways Alliance and Educating All Learners Alliance are uniting around a shared vision that every learner deserves a well-prepared educator, and every educator deserves systems and supports that can continue to support their growth. In this conversation, we'll explore how apprenticeships, practices, and data infrastructure can work together to build a strong future for education. This is not just a crisis of educator supplies. It is a systems challenge that no single initiative can solve alone. So that's why the Pathways Alliance and ELA are coming together to model what cross-sector solution-driven partnerships can do. Um, as I mentioned before, the reality is we're facing a challenge when it comes to ensuring that every learner has a well-prepared educator. This is not just about teacher shortages, as I mentioned before. No single organization can fix this alone. So we're excited to really model what cross-sector solution-driven partnership can look like in its practice. Next slide, please, Laura. Why partnership matters. We are tackling systemic challenges that requires a collective action. Collaboration allows us to align goals, pool resources, and reach learners more effectively. When organizations like ours work together, we can create solutions that no one could build in isolation. As I mentioned before, the Pathways Alliance and ELA, we focus on building accessibility, affordability, and career-connected education prep pathways. ELA really focuses on ensuring all learners, especially students with disabilities, have the support that they need, and also that together, both alliances, we are stronger. Next slide, please, Laura. I'd really like to talk about a little bit of our mission, and then I will pass it on to Aurora so she can talk a little bit about ELA's mission as well. At Pathways Alliance, we envision a radically transformed learning ecosystem where every learner accesses educational opportunities and resources that prepare them to contribute and succeed in a global society and economy. Some of our goals is that we look forward to building trust among stakeholders to facilitate collaboration, utilize shared messaging, definitions, and data for transparency. We ensure that, and we also look forward to trying to create access to seasoned coalition of experts. We also try to identify gaps and establish equitable, affordable pathways for teachers and apprentices. Aurora?
Thanks, Sabrina. The Educating All Learners Alliance, or EALA for short, because that's what we need is another acronym in the world of special education, in the world of education. Like I said, we are an uncommon alliance. I would like to say we pull in partners and folks from across the education sector to lend to different voices and different perspectives. We formed in March of 2020, basically as a response to COVID-19 in order to, activate a set of allies across educators, organizations, policymakers to think about how can we support um, students across this at that time, the pandemic, the shutdown, schools were going remote. And what we learned, unsurprisingly and unfortunately, is that our students with disabilities and learning differences were often being left behind and left out of the conversation. So the coalition was formed from, a 10-person conference call back in March of 2020. Now we're over 170 partners strong. Thousands of educators, parents, school leaders, and even some students are part of the EALA verse, the EALA expanded universe, um, all focused on, continuing this mission of building and cultivating capacity for the field, and sharing and disseminating knowledge, best practice, and support for students with disabilities and learning differences. And one thing I always like to say is that being a person with a disability or learning difference is not a monolithic identity. There are so many other identities and other things that inform you as a learner. Um, so we really try to consider, all aspects of somebody's identity and how that affects their access to education. So with that, we can go on to the next slide and dig into examples of collaboration or cross-sector work. Sabrina, do you want to take this?
Yes, I would absolutely love to talk about a little bit of some of our examples of collaboration of or across our sector work. And I'll definitely start by talking about for example, how we've aligned registered teacher apprenticeship programs to include teaching standards that we develop with the national guideline standards for high quality educator apprenticeships. And we have continued to build shared tools like the Registered Teacher Apprenticeship Compendium, which highlights quality models across the nation today of registered teacher apprenticeship programs that follows these guidelines that and support these guidelines that we have built out. A few years ago, I want to say even a few years ago, when we found out about what robust movement the teacher residency was. There was only about two registered teacher apprenticeship programs in the pipeline. As of today, there are about 48 states that have registered teacher apprenticeship programs, as well as Puerto Rico and um, other US entities as well. So we're excited to hear that in just a few years, the momentum has like gone so far and has become so vast. And that's because we have a coalition of partners that have come together to really sit down and iron out initiatives on what looks best for the quality of teacher education today. And also that it's very important to decide who sits in front of our students and what does that look like? We want to ensure that the teachers that are in front of our students want to be there and that also they're receiving the supports and the guidelines and the mentorship to also be successful at their job. So it's very twofold. Um, we've also partnered on initiatives like Project Unicorn's work on IEP data interoperability, and I will pass it on to
Yeah.
Aurora to share a little bit more about that.
Yeah, the Moving with the Mission is a really great example of this collaboration, this cross-sector work that's only possible through robust partnerships. Project Unicorn, many of you out there are familiar with them. Their focus is on data interoperability. which is a whole separate conversation and a whole separate topic. Basically ensuring that student data is shared securely, safely, but efficiently and effectively enough so that everybody can do their jobs. One of the this moving with the mission is really focusing on how to support military families and students who are whose families are actively engaged in the military. They move around a lot, right? They go from district to district. What happens to their IEPs, their 504 plans? How is that being transferred safely and securely? EALA and Project Unicorn, we're working on that and bringing some answers and some resources to the table. That's one example of cross-sector work in the ELA-verse. We also have several field-based pilots or initiatives. Many of you might be familiar with the school study tours, and the community of action is the big one that I always like to bring up as a perfect example of bringing folks together, partnerships and uncommon allies. We bring together different organizations to collaborate on tough challenges. This happens annually, and folks will walk out of this convening after a 36-hour design sprint with real funding to tackle these real challenges to make a real change in real time. Yeah, with that, let's look at the next slide. What do we got here? So, Brittany, you want to kick us off?
Yes, absolutely. And I just want to further continue to talk about why collaboration matters. Of course, you will obviously hear things like making education and the workforce pathways accessible, affordable, and aligned to opportunity. We look forward to building systems where progress is transparent, credentials are portable, and data tells a full story. We ensure to shine a spotlight on what's working to scale impact nationally, and working at an intersection of education, workforce, and technology that's really engaging K to 12, higher ed, state agencies, nonprofits, and employers. Um, so to continue about that, like being a part of an alliance is extremely important, or just having folks that help drive the work forward. If you're not a part of an alliance, that's okay. But we really want to bring together, whether it's education prep programs, states, districts, higher ed institutions, school districts, to really focus on defining and measuring quality, tracking progress, and ensuring our programs are leading with a stronger outcome. Whether that's retention, career advancement, approved wages for educators, better reinforcements for students with disabilities, or ensuring that students have the proper tools that they need in the classroom to be successful. We do this work with all of that in mind, and we continue to do this work with and through our partners, because change at this scale only happens collectively. So we definitely, excuse me, Laura, next slide, please. And we also want to take a moment to really highlight some of the partners that we work with at Pathways Alliance, and some of our EALA partners as well. And as I mentioned before, this work is done collectively, and we all share a vision to drive this work forward. So like I mentioned before, what you will see is a collective of partnerships. And we continue to do this work so that we can reimagine what new educators are learning regarding the needed competencies for today's school models, of course. We're ensuring how they learn, how students are learning.
Oh,
Oops, Sabrina might be frozen.
well, with that, I will give Sabrina a moment to get
As
her
well.
tech working up again.
You froze, Sabrina. I'd say go back like 30 seconds.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, well, I lost my train of thought, but no worries at all. So I probably was knee deep in talking about how we actively work towards supporting an implementation of practical, affordable educator prep programs, and as well as ensuring that there are sustainable tools and models for students in the classroom as well, so that they can succeed. So what you will find with all of our partners is that we are doing this by creating connective tissue among organizations to drive cohesion, resources, and knowledge sharing in this vital field. So again, whether that's including developing a comprehensive resource library, or creating an extremely amazing toolkit, or data models with our partners at EALA, or even coming down to a standard definition of what a quality teacher residency or teacher apprenticeship would look like, we set out to address all of the problems that we are seeing in the field, and we do it with partnership. And I'll let Aurora talk a little bit about her partners as well over at ELA.
Yeah. If as you notice, I mean, first of all, the EALA partners, like I said, there's over 170 now. These slides, I could definitely do to update them a little bit. There may be a couple of partners that aren't included at this moment. But the point here, and Laura, you can go to the next slide too, just to sort of keep showing the span, the scope of all of the different partners. One of the most interesting things I like to look forward to is the crossover, right? If we're talking in, ELAverse, MCU, expanded universe language, I always think about these crossover events where there's Pathways Alliance partners or Project Unicorn partners, or ELA partners that are all working together, represented across these different coalitions and organizations. And you can go to the last slide too to wrap up our ELA partners. What I hope the impact, the impact of sharing all of these logos across different slides, is to, really sort of drive home the impact, the message of all of these different organizations working together. I don't know if folks from, a small, nonprofit startup that somebody, started in their basement, would they be able to be in the same room or the same conversation as a national organization like Getting Smart, like CAST? It's great to be able to connect these folks. So now they are in the coalition together. They can build this network of networks approach, and ultimately make their own work stronger by having access to these other networks and other ways to support each other. So great. Let's see on the next slide what we've got. Sorry, catching up with my notes here. So we're going to give a couple of examples on the next slides of how ELA and how Pathways are, the specific ways that we're leveraging our partnerships. We're leveraging these uncommon alliances to fuel progress and to fuel change. So the first example is system alignments. Bringing together folks, like I said, from different corners of the sector. ELA, we're all about bringing together schools, districts, and organizations to break down those silos, make sure that what folks are doing in those, folks that are working at a nonprofit and folks that are working in the district, making sure that they're able to sit at the same table, metaphorically speaking, right, to share insights and best practices. We support educators through access to resources and tools that they'll need to help meet the needs of all learners, especially learners with disabilities. There's a lot of information out there. And so being able to sort of curate and collect the resources and these resources are vetted by our ELA partners and provided by ELA partners. So being able to use that strength of our 170 plus organizations to support those on the ground is a big goal and something I'm really proud of with ELA. Sabrina, tell me a little bit about Pathways and how you're using system alignments to further progress.
Yeah, absolutely. In order to do so, as you did such a great job explaining, we ensure that our educator prep programs are accessible, affordable, and career connected. As I mentioned earlier, through registered apprenticeships and teacher residency, and also scalable workforce aligned models. And what we were seeing is that, of course, nationwide, teacher shortages were most acute in like high need areas such as special education, multilingual instruction in STEM, and that these programs really lacked accessibility, and also failed to support candidates adequately. So, what we set out to do was ensure that we had a compounding workforce, where that we saw these fragmented issues, and we could bring together for ways to seek initiatives that could create scalable, and also practical solutions to some of these challenges. And as I mentioned, we cannot do that alone. I don't know how many more times I can reiterate that or drive that home. But we really wanted to create a system where we could streamline all these processes to ensure that we were highlighting these places, such as special education, where the demand was noticeable, but also being sure to equip teachers, apprentices, and also students with the skills to deliver instruction and differentiated learning strategies as well. As I mentioned before, we wanted to support all students effectively, especially with those that had various learning needs. So, in the collaboration with our stakeholders, we developed a central approach to do so. And this brought forth many of our resources, many of our reports, many of the conversations that we were having, and we realized there's a strength in numbers. There's a strength in numbers, and if we were able to tackle this together, it makes more sense than doing siloed work, which is what was happening in the field as well. So having all these folks and partners sit at our coalition and sit at the table is like, hey, if you're doing the work over here and you're doing the work over here, it makes sense to do the work together to reach a central idea on how to support. So I would say that within the past few years of ELA and the Pathways Alliance, we've seen such an impact with both programs. And that's because we foster and support partnering organizations that allow us to be thought leaders in this space.
Thank you for that. Oh, am I on mute? Nope, I'm not on mute. Um, Sabrina and I, we both, we work together often, we're colleagues, but I just have to say it's always great to hear, hear more about like what you're doing and the work you're doing and all the different ways that our work intersects and connects. So it's just great to, hear it and see it in action.
Agreed.
So the second example that we wanted to share, how partnership fuels progress. We think about data and transparency infrastructure, right? How do we, use this cross-sector collaboration to support data infrastructure? One of the ways one of the ways that EALA is doing it is through our partnerships with research organizations, researchers, and policymakers. We really try to create actionable briefs that can help folks distill the information and turn it into something actionable, something that you can do about it, and to sort of, to amplify the existing structures that are out there that support all students. Sometimes, like I said, there's a lot of information out there. Um, and oftentimes I feel that people who are maybe not directly doing the work daily, day in and day out, sometimes, research can feel overwhelming or can feel inaccessible. So what EALA is really trying to do, and a great example of that, is our Prioritizing Students with Disabilities in AI policy brief. We work with New America and many other EALA partners and collaborators to put together a policy brief to give examples and ideas for how we can use AI to support education, to further, especially for students with disabilities, but also keeping that privacy and safety piece top of mind. So that's just one example of how being able to be connected with all of these different partners and this network of networks approach is leading to, the real change in the real world, right? We're able to put forward recommendations that hopefully will shift and shape and improve outcomes for all of our students, especially our kiddos with learning differences, but really for everybody out there. Yeah, so Sabrina, tell us a little bit about data in your work.
Yes, as I mentioned before, we spent a lot of time thinking about how to remove financial and structure barriers, and how to make these pathways work better for people who have struggled to get into the education profession. But one of the examples that I would love to highlight on how we're doing this through data right now is we're working with EdFi Alliance to build upon the great work that they have already done in the educator data model, and really working to expand that to include apprenticeships. And this would also support that work by creating a national data framework that supports apprenticeship programs. So that would include everything from tracking candidate progress to helping states meet federal reporting requirements. And that kind of interoperability, which I learned from ELA and Project Unicorn, that word. So it took me a while to learn how to pronounce it. So thank you guys. Is essential if we want these programs to scale and be sustainable. So, also what I would love to highlight in this space as well is that we've also developed national guideline standards for K to 12 registered apprenticeships as well. And we are working on some other guidelines in some various spaces. But these standards really help align the field around quality and consistency as well. So as we really focus and really look into the flexibility for local innovation, our focus with data and systems building is really inspiring us to make sure that aspiring educators don't have to navigate this journey alone or from scratch.
I love that. I mean, on the next slide, we could talk about driven supports, which is, yeah, we've been talking about this. This is kind of what I feel is kind of the flagship or that's the core of ELA's work and Pathways as well, is that both of these projects, Pathways and ELA, we're all about producing high quality, high utility um, implementation oriented tools, meaning that we want educators to be able to access tools at their fingertips, knowing that they are high quality, best in class. We're using that to scale what works from national standards in order to ensure that implementation is available for all students and sustainable. So examples of that in the ELA verse or in ELA, and I might drop some links in the chat too, Laura, if you don't mind. I'm trying to see what I got here. But so we've got the ELA resource library, right? This is a free open access. I know I didn't put the links in the slides, so I might have to dig them up. ELA resource library, free open access. This was kind of the flagship of ELA. This is where it all started back in 2020. Who's got information about policy? Who's got information about teacher training? Who's got information about disability advocacy? Putting all that together into one place, the resource library has been really, I hope, really, really effective in implementing change. And all of the resources in there link back to the original artifact. So we're not sort of like taking or co-opting people's work. In fact, we're amplifying and sharing it. Tech Tool Library is another great example of, I think of this as a directory. Some tools are free, some aren't. The idea is that these tools that are in here are tools that have top-notch accessibility guidelines, accessibility features. And this way, if you're a teacher or you're anybody who's working in a classroom and you want to, take a look at some tools that have, especially certifications, to figure out what's going to work best in your classroom, that's going to be able to serve all learners. Tech Tool Library, we want to think of it as your one-stop shop for where to find that information. And like I said earlier, we do field-based initiatives and community building for educators and leaders, and all of these things that we do. Ultimately, it's that driven support for folks on the ground, and it's only possible through the work of our partners and the expertise of our partners, right? Bringing everybody together just sort of deepens the pool of knowledge. So yeah, so I'll pass it to you, Sabrina. Tell us about what kind of driven supports you got in Pathways.
Yeah, and I definitely would love to just piggyback and drive your point home because I think you made such a great point just about how driven supports are what really turn a coalition from what could be like a very loose network into a force for change. And what we're seeing is that they really provide a structure and momentum needed for collaboration to succeed. So whether that's aligning members around a shared vision and creating systems for accountability or ensuring that partners and people who are doing the work really have the tools and capacity to fully participate. So by doing this work and by building strong data systems, regular communication, and coordinated strategies, whether that be around funding, um, or even so much more than that, we're seeing that some of our driven supports is really what keep the coalition focused and impactful. And I will say, and I'm pretty sure the same thing for EALA as well, our partners really work in support in creating these driven supports. So it's not just us who do this work alone, but we really sit together and create outlines and create final products around what supports are really needed, and how do we come to a final conclusion to ensure that there's glue that holds the partnerships together, and then that there's this engine that moves the collective work forward. And I can say that for Pathways, some of the ways that we have done this in partnership is through our registered apprenticeship programs compendium, as I mentioned earlier. We've created some first step guides for teaching apprenticeship programs that don't know where to start, whether you are an EPP or an educator prep program, whether you're a local education force, whether you are a state or a district, practically your first steps on how to get started. And we are very proud of that because we understood that that was needed and folks had questions and we could provide answers as a unit. And we really wanted to make sure that we had an alignment of resources for what we were putting out.
Thanks, Sabrina. On our next slide, we'll be able to finally, I'm going to pass the mic. Sabrina and I have given you a lot of information. And our guest speaker today, Brett Rower of Amplify and Elevate Innovation. We brought Brett along today because we want to really show, want to give it an example and show how, partnership, collaboration, coalition building, what does this look like in action? Brett and I were able to connect during ASU GSV during a networking event, right? So great to see how those things really kind of turn, idea into reality. So, Brett, it's great to have you here today. I would love for you to kick us off. Just tell us a little bit about you, your org, and your work before I dive into the nitty-gritty questions.
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you, Aurora and Sabrina. It's so great to hear all the amazing things, right? I come to the biweekly partnership meetings, but it's just incredible to see it all, come together and to go really highlight some of the work you all are leading. So it's an honor to be here. My name is Brett Rower. I'm the founder and CEO of Amplify and Elevate Innovation. So the very quick background about myself, I spent 16 years in public education, started as a high school teacher in Brooklyn at a CTE school, then became their college and career advisor, then became an assistant principal, oversaw a 4-year guidance sequence and curriculum I called College 101 to really make sure every student, each step of the way, kind of had that practice and that grace that we all deserve, culminating in obviously graduating and finding your career or college path. Then became a principal in the Bronx, a high school principal for 4 years. And then during COVID, like many people, we had another child and we started to really think about, how do you find that balance? And I quickly recognized I could not find that balance as an education leader. Personally, I'm so impressed and I admire people that can. But something I also learned in the past few years is I'm a neurodivergent learner and that went undiagnosed for 40 years. And so some of those things like not being able to let go of work and come home and being able to switch when needed. Turns out when my son entered kindergarten, he was evaluated. He was diagnosed with ADHD, and that really helped my learning journey and find the supports that I need to be a more effective leader and then a more effective parent and partner and friend. So I founded Amplify and Elevate Innovation, and it's really about finding what's working in education. Our main focus has been in the past few years, artificial intelligence or AI. So I've been really fortunate to work on statewide initiatives, which is one of the areas I want to share today, is finding partnership between school districts, nonprofit, government agencies, and then obviously just educators in general to support students. So that's been a really transformational part is we support through professional development, primarily education leaders at the state, county, district, and school building levels. We also help with putting on student AI challenges and competitions, which, as we know, is about to scale up through the presidential AI challenge. We support teachers through virtual, live, and asynchronous AI professional development, kind of all the things you need in the lack of guidance, even though organizations like yours do tremendous work. I lead AI summits around the country. I've led 12 of them in the past 2 years with hundreds of educators, sometimes hundreds of district leaders. And the scariest / most driving force for me is even this summer, I led 2 of them. I said, raise your hand if you have an AI policy and guidance that's ready to hit the ground running on day 1 of school. And over 2 AI summits in 2 different states with hundreds of leaders, I've got less than a handful that would do that.
Mhm.
So that's the work. That's what's so meaningful to me, and happy to share more about
Yeah.
how we do what we do.
That's great. I mean, it's really eye-opening, and I'm really glad that folks like you're out there doing the work, kind of at the forefront, this like new frontier of education technology. So, you are a coalition builder, amplify and elevate innovation. This is a big part of what you do. So tell us a little bit more about, how you've done that. What does coalition building look like in your context? And then the second part of that is, and why? Why is it so essential?
Yeah. So one area, as I mentioned, that I found that was really essential, has probably been the most eye-opening experience post being an education leader, is in the age of AI, right? Everyone understands the need to find guidance, to make people feel secure and empowered in their roles, whatever that is in education, whether it's an education leader, educator, parent, support staff member. We're all in this together, right? For students. So about 2 years ago, I was fortunate to get to work with state leaders in Ohio, along with a really amazing nonprofit, AI EDU, which is constantly in partnership with Innovate EDU and this umbrella and coalition you all have. We started doing things like create a district toolkit. We started putting on statewide convenings, which were free to educators across the state. So we've done 9 of them in 2 years. Thousands of educators have come, and we're trying to provide, the best possible professional development, having amazing speakers and sessions, but it's all in service of really getting to the root of, in your role, what's the most impactful way you can serve students. So it's been amazing to get to work with state leaders all the way to the head of the Ohio Department of Education and Workforce, Steve Dakin, to nonprofit leaders, to hundreds of educators on the ground floor. That's been incredible to see that over the last 2 years grow in the state of Ohio and have this great ripple effect. But what's been really important is getting to share with them. Sometimes it still feels, if you're on the front lines of education, that there's not guidance, there's not a plan. And so I constantly have to remind them, like, you're experts in this field of education and adaptive change, even if you don't want to be. And this is a new one, and it is a big one, but you're prepared for it. And we're really there to make sure when that progress feels slow, you recognize you still are on that pathway. And sometimes I share with Ohio educators, even though it doesn't feel this way, I promise you, you are truly on the forefront of this. You've seen and done work over the past few years that very few educators have. But what I often notice is I try to bring that back to other communities I serve. So in New York City, where I was an educator, I'm now leading an AI academy for principals. So all public school principals are going to have access to this. We're working with superintendents because we know if they see the need for this and we find the most innovative superintendents, that gives their principals the freedom to opt in or to feel like they'll be supported if it's not exactly where they are. I work with organizations like ISTE. So we built a community practice with some of the biggest nonprofit leaders and backed by google.org, where I'll be leading 30 building leaders across the country. We're going to progress, monitor our work. We're going to share it next year at ISTE Live. So I try to find those communities. Obviously, New York City's a vast community of 1,800 school leaders, the whole country, and then the whole state level. But whatever I'm learning in one place, I quickly try to make sure we build a coalition in a new location, and we try to take those best practices and really scale and start where, the learnings have taken us.
That's great. And as everybody knows out there who's listened to any EALA podcast or been in any virtual room with me, New York City is my home, born, bred, and based, and it's part of my personality. So great to see the work that you're doing in our hometown. Uh, let's talk about a lesson. One lesson, if you could pick one lesson you've learned about collaboration, and how has that lesson maybe changed the way that you show up or you lead in this work?
Yeah. So this is probably the most important thing I do. There's so many things you can do with AI. The thing that I actually do more than anything is I constantly tell people, regardless of your role in education, you need to capture wisdom, whatever room you're in. If you're in a room full of students, parents, combination, educators, education leaders, doesn't matter. There is wisdom there that whether you're neurodivergent or not, you are going to forget that the second you walk out of that room, because the next part of your life is going to begin. So I'm a huge proponent of obviously consensual recording of meetings and transcripts. And what I do with that constantly, I often show in real time how quickly we can capture wisdom and apply it into action around whatever framework or model or beliefs you have, as long as you record that wisdom and attribute it to those people. So when we say we're trying to solve X problem, I always tell people it doesn't matter what the problem is. The reason typically we don't solve it is because we have the wisdom, we have the ideas, we have the willingness. We often don't have the ability to take this large swath of data and apply it quickly. And so I typically show people this, what I call the AI sandwich. It's like, if you can capture that wisdom first, whatever tool you're going to use, and obviously with guidance, you're going to be able to produce something that shows people feel seen and heard. And once you've done that, like in Ohio, a lesson that I learned, right? Ohio is a very diverse state. It has very large populations that agree with different ideological philosophies in education as well as in politics. I was able to take, by going to each quadrant of Ohio, hundreds of educators filled out a very brief survey about like what values they want students to leave their district with, and then what are their hopes, fears, and goals using AI. And we were able to create like portraits of a learner, portraits of a graduate. What is the AI professional development that teachers deserve? I was able to walk to different areas that you would have never think had commonalities and show them how it's evolved and say, like, I would keep words up there that might not be in vogue in certain parts of Ohio, like equity. But I showed them this is what educators meant by equity. And I said, this isn't someone from New York saying it. These are you. These Ohio educators across the state. It's equal distribution, right? It's a purple state. But you all are asking for this. And when you take their words and mirror it back to them using AI, it's very hard for people to say that's not what they want because it's their words. And if you attribute it to them and then show quantifiable data, like which AI is very good at doing, you can show hundreds of people fill this out from all these different regions. So you can't tell me that this isn't what you all believe because it's yours mirrored back to you, just more efficient than we're used to. That to me is the biggest lesson. Capture wisdom, don't leverage it in a way that to weaponize it, use it in a way to empower people, but to really show them you're listening. And then to say, now that we know where we are, where are we going to go next? We know the answers, but we have to capture it and apply it. In this case, using AI. That's my favorite tool to coalition building that I've been using the past few years.
Right. Thank you so much for that, Brett. Completely understand that. I do have one more question for you. And
Yeah.
it sounds like you have a lot of experience just dealing with so many various organizations. How do you balance the need for collective action in a coalition with individual priorities or identities of the organizations involved?
That's an excellent question. So I think it does come back to like, you know, I think it always comes back to finding common ground and then like being able to say we've all established that this is a foundation. And again, there's a couple different ways I do this. One is, and I often do this jokingly, but it's real. I'll say to one of the meetings I was at in Ohio, we had 370 district or principals or building leaders in a room, and I asked them to fill out a survey. And I said, raise your hand if you've ever felt like someone like, and their leader was in the room, like someone might actually say, like, fill this out. And you know darn well it's not going to do anything. It's either for a checklist or say they did it or whatever. And then I said, and then let's be honest, have you ever done that where you've given someone a survey to fill out knowing like you're going to be too busy to really dig into the data? And so what I like to do is quickly show them how, again, using AI, we're finding common ground immediately. And then we could tease out and parse out, however, here are some of the anomalies, or here are things that are in this room. Sometimes I'll do it and I'll say like an hour later, I'll show them like really granular feedback or visual images representing it, or things that'll just capture their imagination in different ways. But the thing I like to show is here's where we already are like, if we want to start today, here's our common values, and everyone in this room helped build it. But here's some of the outliers. Here's some of the anomalies in the room that we have to address and make sure everyone understands if we're going to move together, whether it's a region, a state, a school district. We have to acknowledge that these other beliefs are here. And how do we make those people feel comfortable with change? So I think it has to be both. You have to name all of it, but before it would be very hard to do that and maybe sometimes give too much voice to the loudest vocalist people, which might be a vocal minority. Well, now you can show, well, this is true, and people will say this here, but actually only like 3 out of 300 of you said it. So we're talking about 1% do feel this way, and we need to validate that, but let's also not over-validate it to the point where we're not moving forward with the 99% of us who agree with something. So that's the way I like to really strategically show that everyone is seen and heard, but acknowledge those differences of opinion might not be as large as sometimes the voices are loud and large.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. And I think you really just highlighted ways to deal with strategy, and of course, like also with increasing and maintaining momentum without losing authenticity, which is very important. So thank you. And
Absolutely.
yes, that would lead us into our next slide, Laura, where we really just want to highlight again just some coalition building supports for those that was able to join us today. And as well, this call will be recorded, so we definitely want those who could not make it to also enjoy some of this amazing information. So we will also share it in that manner. But we also just want folks to know that you can always join professional and issue-based networks, whether it be associations and coalitions and nonprofits aligned to your focus area. So that's, for example, Digital Promise, CAST. We also want to engage with regional and cross-sector groups, so that state, regional education networks, community foundations, and workforce or higher ed partners. And also give folks the opportunity to connect at events. And I think, Aurora, you mentioned that you met Brett at an event. So you never know. And also in online communities as well. So conferences like South by Southwest, EDU, EdCamps, and online spaces, of course, like LinkedIn. And other various education networks and online spaces as well. So I also want to pass it to Aurora, who would talk to us a little bit about our call to action.
Yeah, thank you. So on our next slide, just trying to, I always want folks to leave an event with some concrete next steps, or some ideas for how to take everything that we talked about, turn it into a reality, and how to support and maybe, further or improve the work that you're doing. So I'm always going to encourage folks to engage with our partners, EALA, Pathways, leverage what exists. We've already got these incredible resources. Like I said, the resource library, the Pathways Compendium, partner networks, other curated tools. Leverage what exists. If you're not an EALA partner, but you think you might be a good fit, shoot me an email. I'll drop my email in the chat. Same thing with Pathways. If you want to learn more about how to sign up for Pathways newsletters, updates, Sabrina's your go-to person. So my first step or my first call to action would be to leverage what exists, what's out there. Second thing is stay connected. As I just said, sign up for those newsletters, fill out those partner intake forms where it's appropriate, participate in upcoming convenings and webinars. On the other side of this, I do feel that there is, you want to identify where and what your which networks and which coalitions, which professional groups really speak to you. Sabrina mentioned that on the previous slide, thinking about is it location based? Is it interest based? Many of these are free, some are not. So, you'll want to be careful, or you'll want to be aware of your own bandwidth, right? But staying connected can really yield incredible results. So to keep the momentum going, I always say, you walk out of a webinar, you walk out of almost an hour of us talking at you. Think about it. Identify one step that you can take in the next 30 days that might strengthen or even initiate a new partnership. So that's kind of my challenge to all of you out there listening, watching, even if you're watching this back on a recording, you can still take the 30-day challenge. What's one step that you can do to initiate or strengthen a partnership? So that's it on our next slide. I'm going to open it up for some Q&A. And before we wrap it up with some closing thoughts and ways to engage. And I'll also bring it back to Brett too on our following slide if you want to share some ways to stay connected. But first, questions. Anything we got out there? All right. If not, well, give us a second. But if you've got questions, please go ahead and throw it in the chat. Let us know. So as I said, the EALA and Pathways are all possible because of this community we've built, the networks approach. So here we go. Here are some of those concrete ways that you can get involved. Do you know an organization that would make a great partner? Introduce us. Got our emails there. Do you have a free resource that's helpful to our audience? Let us know. We've got the EALA resources at innovateedunyc.org. It's a mouthful, but it's a great email to have. If you've got a free resource, send it that way. Or you could fill out the resource form at the Pathways on their website, thepathwaysalliance.org. Finally, stay informed. We want to get you to sign up for those updates. Lots of great stuff come through these free newsletters. Uh, Go to visit educatingalllearners.org and thepathwaysalliance.org to sign up for updates. And Brett, anything that you want to add here? How can we stay engaged? How can we stay connected to the work that you're doing?
Yeah, one thing that I'm really excited by is we were really fortunate. Myself and my chief innovation officer launched a podcast last year. So it's called Amped to 11. I'll drop that in the comments just a moment. But we've had some of the biggest names in AI and education. Dan Fitzpatrick, Claire Zhao from ASU GSV or GSV Ventures, Alex Catran, the CEO of AIDU. We really try to bring on the people that I'm really fortunate that I get not only to work alongside, but sometimes at these conferences get to be in community with. And sometimes you get to be like a fly on the wall and like pick their brains. And that's a dream come true. So I often try to bring that to as many people as possible. So we're going to start season 2 in October, but season 1 was great. Hopefully that we're able to present at South by Southwest on some of the amazing work that all of us are doing in collaboration. We're putting on more AI summits across the country. I'm going to be presenting at AI summits and leading some in Tennessee, Indiana, Ohio, New York, and Pennsylvania in the next few months. So if you're in one of those states or beyond, or if you'd like some help leading these things in your states, as you can see, it's my passion to really empower people and to bring communities together around common goals. And in this case, it's making sure everyone feels safe, supported, and empowered through the use of ethical AI. So any of those ways would be great. And I think someone dropped my website before, and I'm pretty prolific on LinkedIn. That's the one, amp211.com. And yeah, any of those ways, and just reach out to me on LinkedIn if you ever want to talk and grab a virtual coffee. You'll probably find me on a walking pad, and we can have a great conversation if that's your cup of tea.
I do have a question in the chat. From a global benchmarking perspective, is there a resource or resources that you would recommend? Anybody out there got a
Yeah, I would say that's a really good question. And from a global benchmarking perspective, there are a few key resources that may be valuable. For example, I can put one in the chat, um, and that is um, UNESCO's Global Education Monitoring Reports, and they really just support and highlight international best practices for education system changes. So that may be a really good one. But while our coalition work is grounded in the US, looking at how are the country structured teacher preparation, support learners, and sustain partnerships definitely can spark ideas. So as we share, we would definitely encourage others to open up the floor to share as well. Thank you.
Um, from not necessarily global benchmarking, so I'm not trying to like dodge this question, but just wanted to highlight some other really great partners and coalitions that I'm big supporters of. We said Digital Promise. Digital Promise has many resources and frameworks that I highly recommend from a really trusted nonprofit. Again, I've mentioned before that I'm really fortunate to do work with ISTE, but I think their standards are what most states are now adopting, at least here in the United States, as kind of standards for safe and ethical AI policy guidance and implementation. And then there are really great frameworks. Again, I'm not sure if this is specifically around AI or around a specific sub-demographic in education, but there are many states now that have really released amazing policy guides on safe and ethical implementation. So North Carolina has a really great one. Ohio has a great one. I believe Massachusetts just updated or released their guidelines on safe and ethical AI policy and implementation. So from a state level, those are really great frameworks that I would highly recommend taking a look at. But the ones that you mentioned, like UNESCO, that would be the one I would also recommend from a benchmarking perspective.
Yeah. And thinking about, global connectedness, thinking about students, young people, again, most of our work is US based, but we do have several EALA partners that are doing work internationally. One I just dropped in or I will drop it in the chat. The International Youth Foundation, they are all about putting young people first and creating those pathways to economic opportunity. So if you're thinking about, if you're a teacher, if you're an educator and you're watching this, and you're thinking about how can I support my students in this kind of global mindset, I always recommend folks check out the work that IYF does. It's hard to really sort of wrap your head around like, really local to global, but we're trying to do it all. So that was a great question. Thank you so much for dropping that in there. Great. And I think we've got some another oh no, those are questions
Yeah,
or yeah.
that was another virtual AI summit that's happening really shortly, I think in next 2 weeks or so, but it has a lot of international speakers that are coming together to share best practices and guidance from around the world.
Yeah, I think that we have dropped those. I'm going to make sure that I drop that in the everyone chat. I realized that I was only sharing that in the panelist chat. So here we go. I'm going to drop this in everyone. We are just about at time, folks. So, Sabrina, any last words or
Yes,
anything?
again, we would love to thank everyone for joining us today and hearing a little bit about, of course, we could probably talk about this for hours, but really the importance of coalition building and having a strong support system in this education space. So we hope that those points were reached today, and we definitely want to thank Brett for joining us and also sharing his amazing insights as well. We could not do this work without partners like you. So we thank you for your time and your supports, and we hope to cross paths with you all again.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank
Have a
you
good
very
one,
much.
guys.